So she is currently a postdoc scholar in the Department of Geography at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She's going to actually present on some work that she's done the past 7 years when she was at the Florida State University, where her main focus was on analyzing satellite images and modeling the movement and fate of natural and unnatural oil slicks in the Gulf of Mexico as a function of air-sea interaction. So she's going to go ahead and talk about the work that she's done using the Saildrone, and I will let her go ahead and talk.
Hello everyone. I would like to thank Sea Grant and Monica for inviting me to give a seminar. I'm Samira Daneshgar. I was a PhD and postdoc in Dr. Ian McDonald's lab at Florida State University, FSU. Now recently I joined the geography department in the University of California, Santa Barbara. Today I'm going to talk about the use of an unmanned surface vehicle Saildrone to study the natural oil seeps in the Gulf of Mexico. The following video describes what the Saildrone is.
A Saildrone is an unoccupied autonomous sailing craft controlled remotely by Saildrone Incorporated using an app on the iPhone, and houses a suite of sensors and instruments for collecting data from the environment.
The Saildrone is around 20 feet long, 18 feet off the water, weighs about 600 pounds, and can operate kind of indefinitely. The wind is propulsion that pushes it along, solar charges the batteries, which runs the computers and the communications.
NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory began using Saildrones in 2015 to study physical oceanography. 2 Saildrones sailed the Bering Sea off the coast of Alaska for 97 days, traveling 4,500 miles, taking measurements of wind, sea temperature, and salinity, all important factors affecting food availability for fish and marine mammals. These measurements are typically taken by scientists aboard large research vessels. Ships can cost tens of thousands of dollars a day to operate and can go into depths of about 20 meters. On the other hand, Saildrones can travel into shoreline areas to depths of 3 meters and continue sampling in shallow water. While shipwork is weather dependent, Saildrones can stay out for 6 to 12 months at a time and continue sampling in extreme conditions.
So, sensors on the Saildrone were chosen in a way that they cover a wide variety of missions, from physical oceanography to atmospheric science and geophysics needs. In 2015, Saildrone worked with EcoGit Consortium to locate the natural seep sites in the Gulf of Mexico and adaptively sample inside and outside of the seep areas. Here you can see the track of the Saildrone. This is the track of the Saildrone during this mission in the Gulf of Mexico. Saildrone successfully located one of the seep sites that Florida State University was interested in. And this seep site also was confirmed by the overflight of my advisor, Dr. Ian McDonald. I would like to actually thank Evan Jones and Richard Jenkins at Saildrone Incorporation because of sharing the Saildrone data with us during this mission. Here you can see the Saildrone that is carrying a remote optical watcher. Which can detect the oil pollution on the surface of the water by its natural fluorescence. I will talk about the details of this mission later. Now I'm going to explain what are the natural seep sites that we kept talking about, and we would like to study them with the Saildrones. Here, this video was taken from the bottom of the ocean. And this is a natural seep site at the depth of about 1,200 meters in the Gulf of Mexico. It's the GC 600 seep site. As you can see, at natural seeps, oil drops rise from a fixed point at the seafloor to the surface of the ocean. When the oil comes to the surface of the ocean, it spreads out in a thin layer and it generates oil slick, what we call oil slick. Remote sensing plays an important role in detection of the oil slicks on the surface of the water, and one of the most popular satellite images that scientists are using are synthetic aperture radar SAR. Here I'm going to explain how SAR detects oil on the surface of the ocean. As you all know, wind generates roughness on the surface of the water. when the radar energy hits this roughness, some of this backscatter goes back to the sensor. But when we have oil slick on the surface of the water, this oil damps the short gravity waves and damps this roughness. So the backscatter from this incoming energy goes away from the sensor. So this oil slick reduces the radar backscatter, and that's why in synthetic aperture radar images, we can see the oil slicks as a dark target, as you can see here. We can use a TCNNA, texture classifying neural network algorithm, which is developed by Florida State University to delineate these oil slicks from SAR images. And this is the result of this delineation in the right. The reason that we delineate these oil slicks from SAR images is that we can measure the length and area of these oil slicks more accurately, and then that gives us an estimate of the volume, and then we can have an estimate of the flux of the oil into the environment. As I explained before, oil drops rise from a fixed point on the seafloor. When they come to the surface, they spread out in a thin layer from oil slick origin. Here is the oil slick origin. And it moves downstream with wind and surface currents. The oil remains visible on the surface of the ocean until it weathers and disperses. We call this period of time that the oil remains visible on the surface of the water and that satellite can collect the image of it, the surface residence time of the oil slick. Based on the remote sensing surveys, there are about 914 seep zones in the Gulf of Mexico producing persistent oil slicks, which are visible in synthetic aperture radar images. So why are we studying these natural oil seeps? Why we study these natural oil slicks? What can we learn from them? Analyzing natural oil slicks can help us to understand how the oil moves on the surface of the water under the effect of wind and surface currents. And better understanding of the movement of these natural oil slicks under the effect of wind and surface currents, and also estimating the surface residence time of these oil slicks, can improve use of remote sensing during the oil spills. Moreover, the size and persistence of these oil slicks is an indication of the flux of the oil into the environment. If we can estimate the area of these oil slicks and then the surface residence time of these oil slicks, we can have an estimate of how much of the oil comes out of these natural seeps to the surface of the ocean. So this is the map of the Gulf of Mexico, and this yellow star shows the Green Canyon 600 lease block. Our favorite seep site is inside of this Green Canyon 600, and it's the GC600 seep site. GC600 is one of the most prolific natural hydrocarbons that has been discovered, and it's a perennial source of surface oil slicks in the northern Gulf of Mexico. What we did was that we checked the archive of synthetic aperture radar images, and we found 41 SAR images from 2003 to 2011 that were collected over the GC600 area. And we could see the natural oil slick in these SAR images. Then we used the TCNNA algorithm to delineate these oil slicks. So what you see here are 41 colorful oil slicks that were delineated from 41 SAR images from 2003 to 2011. After we measured the length of these oil slicks, we found that on average, the length is about 9 kilometers. They were oil slicks which were about 20 to 30 kilometers and even up to 50 kilometers. So this raised the question that are very long oil slicks generated because of increase in the discharge rate or not? To answer this question, and also to understand the effect of wind and surface currents on the movement of these natural oil slicks, and to estimate the surface residence time of the oil slicks, we decided to use a Lagrangian particle tracking surface oil drift model in which the advective velocity is a linear combination of surface currents and 10-meter wind. I'm not talking about the details of this simulation. I would like to talk about the results. This is one of the SAR images, one of those 41 SAR images that were collected over the GC600 site. And here is the oil slick origin. and you see the oil as a dark target in the SAR image. We use TCNNA to delineate the oil slick from the SAR image. Then we use the Lagrangian particle tracking surface oil drift model, and we performed a set of simulations by increasing the hindcast interval in a reverse time from the SAR image collection time in order to obtain the most closest resemblance between the simulated trajectory and the length and shape of the oil slick observed in the SAR image. So here is the output of our simulation when the input of the model is only surface currents. This is the output when we only use wind as the input of the simulation. And this is the result when we use wind and surface currents together as the inputs of the surface oil advection model. And you can see that this is actually the best match with what we observe in SAR image. This is another example, and it's one of the other 41 SAR images. So, as I explained earlier, the surface residence time of the oil slicks was defined as the period of time that the oil remains visible on the surface and the satellite can collect the oil in the image as a dark target. So we considered the hindcast interval during our simulations. We considered the hindcast interval that best reproduced the length and shape of the oil slick as the surface residence time of that oil slick. And we repeated the simulation for all of these 41 SAR images. And we found that for 41 oil slicks, natural oil slicks that we observed in SAR images with the average length of 9 kilometers, the average surface residence time is 6.4 hours. In order to better understand the relationship between the length of the oil slicks and the variables of wind, current, and the angle between wind and current vectors, we performed a linear regression analysis. I again don't talk about details, but I will show you these two results. Here there is a negative significant relationship between wind speed and the length of the oil slicks, and this shows that wind is an important factor in the disappearance of the oil from the surface. And there is a positive significant relationship between the current speeds and the length of the oil slicks, which shows that current is an important factor in extension of the oil on the surface of the water. Also, this scatter plot shows the relationship between, it shows wind velocity versus the length of the oil slicks in kilometers. As you can see, when the wind velocity is higher than 7 meters per second, the length of the oil slicks is less than 10 kilometers. And we think that this 7 meters per second is the point after which wind starts to mix down the oil into the water column. And that's why oil slicks after this point are shorter, and they are less than 10 kilometers. In order to verify our findings, we used ground truth, and our ground truth was Saildrone study and aerial surveys. So I'm going back to the Saildrone mission in 2015 that I mentioned. As it was mentioned, Saildrone is an autonomous wind power surface vehicle that is equipped with anemometer to measure wind speed and direction, and it has remote optical watcher to detect oil pollution on the surface of the water. Here you can see tiny Saildrone going toward the oil slicks in the Gulf of Mexico. This is a Landsat 8 satellite image that is collected on October 12, 2015 over the GC 574 lease block. This red square is the GC 574 lease block. And we know that there are several natural seeps inside of these lease blocks. The green dots are showing the location of the natural seeps. And you can see the oil slicks originating from these natural seeps on the surface of the water in this satellite image. We decided to have our Saildrone study here, and this is the track of the Saildrone during October 12, 2015, and this yellow, it was supposed to be a star, it shows the location of the Saildrone at the time that the satellite image was taken. When we checked the data on the remote optical watcher, we found this hydrocarbon peaks. And this shows that Saildrone is an effective tool on detection of these thin narrow layers of oil on the surface of the water. Also, we decided to simulate the trajectory of these oil slicks that we observed using our surface oil drift model. During the day that we had Saildrone mission, the average wind speed was about 2 meters per second, and it was wind was low, and the currents were really strong that they didn't let the Saildrone to maneuver well. We used surface currents from HICOM database, and also we used wind speed and direction that was measured by Saildrone, and we adjusted that to the 10-meter wind. And we simulated the trajectory of these oil slicks, which are about 19 kilometers long on the surface of the water. And we found that these oil slicks have an average surface residence time of about 46 hours. So the idea that long oil slicks are generated because of increase in discharge rate was not supported with this study, because periods of low wind and a strong current can generate oil slicks that can persist on the surface of the water for even more than 46 hours. Why? Because after we did the aerial survey, even on October 14 of 2015, 2 days after, we were able to see the oil as a bright target on the surface of the water. And I have to mention that we used a small plane, and we mounted a digital camera vertically oriented at the bottom of this plane in order to capture this aerial photographies from the oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico. In summary, combination of the oil drift model and synthetic aperture radar images at the GC600 site gives us an estimation of the surface residence time of about 6.4 hours for natural oil slicks. We found that surface winds are important factors in disappearance of the oil from the surface of the water, and the Saildrone proved to be an effective tool not only for measuring the speed of wind and the direction of wind, but also to detect thin, narrow layers of oil on the surface of the water. The combination of the Saildrone study and our analysis indicated that surface currents are an important factor in extension of the oil on the surface of the water, and periods of low wind and a strong current can generate oil slicks that persist for a long time. And our study didn't support this idea that these longest slicks are generated because of change in the discharge rate. Thank you so much, and I would be glad to answer the questions.